The idea of having an enormous pedal board has never been something that was particularly attractive to me. However, I've recently been intrigued by some of my favorite session musicians in Nashville, namely players like Tom Bukovac, Justin Ostrander, Derek Wells, Rob McNelley. The list goes on and on and on. I noticed that between a lot of these session musicians, they have a lot of commonalities and overlap between their pedal boards in terms of the overdrive selections, in terms of how they're achieving their delays and reverbs, textural things, boosts, volume pedals, etc. And I thought, it would be interesting to see what would happen if I tried to recreate the common elements amongst those session players' pedal boards and just see what would happen with an amateur like me who clearly doesn't have the same skill, nor do I have the credit accolades that they do. But I thought maybe this might be an interesting learning experience to kind of see what would happen, for example, if you had 5 overdrive and distortion pedals on your pedal board, or if you had duplicate EQs at the front and end of the chain, or if I used a Line 6 M9, something that has been out of fashion for most of the world for almost 20 years, and see what happens if I'm just trying to go through it and play it with a few different instruments and see how it performs. So I'm hoping that this experience teaches me something about why they choose these and is something that I can apply to my pedal board. And maybe through the video, you might want to consider trying for yourself. So what I'd like to do is take you through the pedal board and the signal path. I'll play a little bit of the different pedals that I have. I'll use a few different instruments so you can kind of hear how it sounds in context. And just to remark on the constants, the things that will be the same, we have a Vox AC30. This is a mid-90s Korg era Vox AC30. It's running through a 212 with Celestian Blues. And then I also have a Bandmaster that's from 1965, and that's going to be running through a 212 open back cabinet using G1265s. So we'll have those running in stereo, hard pan left and right. That will be constant. And then I'll probably be using some version of the Deluxe Memory Man and the M9 on everything. I have an overhead cam here so you can see throughout the course of the video kind of roughly where I am, and I'll also try to do my best to kind of name what's going on in terms of the pedal selection. So let's start first. So out of the guitar, we go into the pedal board, which has an interface box that's one of our interfaces, the Vertex buffer interface. We have plenty of videos on that if you're curious about what it does, what a buffer does, and why you might want to consider getting a product like this to help condition the entire pedal board. From there, buffer comes out and immediately hits a product that is new to me, which is the Gig Rig Quartermaster. Daniel from the Gig Rig had sent this over to me about a year ago when I had told him about this project and that I was taking my time and putting it together. And he very generously sent this to me. And it's got 10 loops that are all true bypass. And I have to say, I know that some people have accused me of being uncharitable to the Gig Rig in the past. And I have to say that of any true bypass looper that is out there, this is by far the best one that I've come across. And how I qualify that is most true bypass loopers that are using mechanical switches, which is the majority of them, they tend to degrade the tone to a degree. They tend to pop, which is another thing that can be a problem. And I would also just say that the enclosures on a lot of these that are typically folded metal enclosures with rivets, they don't tend to hold up that well and are pretty much impossible to repair unless you drill out all the rivets and you disassemble it. So I would recommend to anybody who's interested in a true bypass looper to most certainly check out the Gig Rig products as it relates to the true bypass switches and the Quartermaster product itself. I don't have any experience with the switchers, the latest version, the G3, so I can't speak to that, but I can tell you that this is absolutely amazing. It doesn't have any noise. It is very quiet. It's easy to work with. You even have some ability to be able to flip-flop with some switches on there. I'm not using that. I'm just using it as a straight true bypass looper. So let's go into loop 1. So to do that, I'm going to lift up the lid, and I should mention that I'm using a Vertex Tour Elite pedal board with a TE either a TE4 or a TE5 riser. It basically is the Tour Elite, but with a space for a volume pedal on the side, so it's a little narrower of a riser as opposed to going the full width of the pedal board. So you'll see here in loop 1, I have a MXR EQ in addition to a MXR Dynacomp. Now the Dynacomp is an original one. I see a lot of Nashville session musicians using a vintage Dynacomp, guys like Tom Bukovac, and I'm using the MXR 10-band EQ to actually help give it a little bit more life. One of the things that many users of the Dynacomp say is where it's great, but it also has a tendency to dull the sound a little bit and kind of lose some of the sheen on the top. So I'm using that 10-band EQ kind of like a preamp to kind of dial out a little bit of the mid-range and bring back a little bit of that sparkle on the top. And it sounds absolutely incredible. So I'm just going to demonstrate what that sounds like for you off, and then I'll bring it on and you'll get to see the Dynacomp and the EQ all in the same loop together at the same time. So we have a little bit of M9 with some delay, and I got a little bit of Memory Man here with some delay. So here it is off. And now on. So that was the very first channel of the True Bypass selection. Next, I have the RC Booster. Now, I'm not really using the RC Booster on its own so much. I'm kind of using it as a way to add more gain to other pedals. You'll see in the top right-hand corner, I have the Vertex Boost, and that's the very last thing that comes after the True Bypass selection switches. So I have that at the end of everything in terms of the overdrive distortions, modulations, and then I have one early on that's designed to add more gain, because a boost before gain is just going to add more distortion, more saturation. A boost after the gain effects is just going to add more output, more volume, like a master volume would. So I'm not going to show that so much on its own because that's never how I would use it. And I think that that's pretty much how I hear most of the Nashville session musicians talk about using it. So let's use it in combination with some of the overdrives. Now you'll notice in loops 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I have all overdrive and distortion devices. So I have a King of Tone, I have a Nobels ODR-1, I have a Greer Lightspeed, I have a Mostortion MT10 by Ibanez, and then I have a vintage Proco Rat. And one of the things that Nashville session musicians have told me when I ask them what is the reason that they have so many overdrive and distortions, the thing they say back is that when they're going into a session blind, they don't know what the producer is going to be asking for. They basically just need to be able to go through a sequence of different distortion devices and overdrive devices and be able to sort of find the right one that's going to fit and kind of being able to cast a wide net. So they're hearing the song, they're going, okay, King of Tone, no, ODR-1, no, Greer Lightspeed, right, that's the one. And they do that from on a song-by-song basis and primarily into clean-ish amps like I'm running today. And if you wanted a little bit extra gain for a solo, something like that, you might step on the RC Booster. So I think I'm going to do the same thing where I'll play a little passage and I'll maybe toggle between different overdrive and distortion devices so you can kind of hear how they are dissimilar. And then I might stack the RC into one of them and take like a few note lead sound, and you can kind of hear what that sounds like. So let's just recap so far where we are. Guitar comes in, Vertex buffer interface, goes into the quartermaster. Loop 1 had the compressor. We showed that with the EQ. Loop 2 has got the RC booster. I know we talked about demonstrating it. I know I didn't show it. I just kind of showed the overdrives in sequence. I'm just using that to add a little bit more gain. So if I had the King of Tone on and I want to add a little bit more grit, here's the King of Tone. Now RC. Without the RC. I feel like it adds just the right amount of gain without being obtrusive or overtaking sort of the distortion that's already native in whatever pedal it's on. I think it's really great and neutral about that. And I think that that's why you see it on almost every Nashville pedalboard. So from the RC, we went King of Tone, ODR-1, Lightspeed, MT10, the Distortion, the Rat. And then this is a really cool pedal that I see also on almost every pedalboard in Nashville, and it is the Exactone modified GE7. And this is in essence taking a classic GE7 from Boss and modifying it so that it is focused specifically in the mid-range where the guitar sits. Now, the graphic EQ that I have earlier in the chain, that is unmodified. That's straight from Dunlop exactly as it comes, a 10-band EQ. And it covers a much wider range, including some ranges that the guitar doesn't even necessarily able to produce on its own, especially when you're running through guitar speakers that maybe don't go above 5K, sometimes not even that high, depending on the speaker. So this allows you to rein in that EQ to a range that's specific to the guitar and allows you to kind of fine tune some overdrives or just use it as a mid-range boost. So if I'm playing a little rhythm sound, I just want to kick it up a little bit. Here's the rhythm sound. You can hear it almost as acting like a distortion pedal at this point. It's kicking up the mid-range. It's adding a little bit of... It's adding a little bit of grit. And then if I've got that paired with some sort of, let's say, other overdrive, I'm just going to use the King of Tone again. It can just take it up to another level, gives me another flavor of boost, and I can get the guitar to cut through a little bit more, again, depending on the mix. I don't think that this would probably be used so much in isolation. I think you'd be using it more with other instruments, and you kind of need to get surgical about the mid-range to get things to fit through. But it works really great, and it seems to be able to be fine-tuned irrespective of whatever the particular guitar pedal is. The one that I'm actually most interested to try it with is the Rat, which is typically more scooped out. So here's the Rat on its own. With the equalizer. I think that that's a really cool and useful sound. And again, you can kind of fine tune any of your overdrives by way of using that equalizer in order to kind of carve out that mid-range wherever you want it. Next in line is the Boss Vibrato, the VB2. And this is something that I see on Bukovac's board and a lot of other people, including LA session musicians like Michael Thompson. And most people set it to the unlatch feature, which basically allows you to step onto the pedal and it engages the vibrato sequence and allows you to hear that modulation. And then when you pull off your foot, it disengages and tapers out. And I've seen guys like Michael Thompson actually use the volume pedal and the vibrato at the same time for these really beautiful textures. And so this is an original one. Typically these are noisy. I got lucky with this one and it isn't that noisy. And so I'll show you a little bit about how I might use that for some textural stuff. So I'm gonna put on the compressor and I'm gonna put on a little bit more delay. So that is an extremely cool pedal, especially when you're going volume and vibrato at the same time. I just can't get enough of that sort of texture. Again, pairing it a little bit with some Memory Man, a little bit of delay and reverb from the M9. It's an absolutely unbeatable sort of clean textural sound, and I absolutely love that latch feature. Going on to the next pedal, I have another exact tone modified pedal, which is one of the few analog tremolos that remain in the marketplace, which is the XTS multi-mode mod. It actually also has a latching feature similarly to how the VB2 is. I don't really use it for that, but you could use it for a similar thing. I usually just kind of leave it as a, either an on or off sort of effect, but it's a beautiful tremolo. The mod quiets it down and it gives you a volume control on it, which is one of the issues that typically plagues these sorts of effects, where you're always having an issue with when you go to a higher amount of depth, you often will lose some volume. So this ensures that you're able to dial the volume in so that it is unity gain, or you can boost it if you want, no matter what position the knobs are in on the tremolo. So hear a little bit of that tremolo. So that was the tremolo, and it sounds absolutely gorgeous. Again, we did a little guitar change there for this with the Brian Setzer Smoke model Gretsch. Again, something that you would see in the classic Nashville arsenal. And then the last few pedals here are all wired outside of the gig rig quartermaster. And it is the Vertex boost that comes right after the quartermaster. And that's just to add more output. And it also controls the volume pedal, which is acting as an expression for the boost. This is something that I developed over 10 years ago and is widely used by session musicians all over the world, and including players like Tom Bukovac, who have been evangelists of this product since it first came out. And I believe he has both incarnations, both the Mark 1 and Mark 2, same circuit, just different size enclosures. And this is just a straight clean boost when you use it. So it's just whatever you have, but louder. So if I go up, it's just adding more output, not changing the fundamentals of what's there. And in fact, if I turn it all the way to 0, it should just be a unity gain boost, no difference. No change in the characteristic of the guitar or the instrument. It's just adding more level. On this new version, I have little detints for every decibel of volume boost, so you can dial in the exact amount of level that you want, and you can easily find it again if you know how many dB of boost that you want when your boost is on. And of course, it has the added bonus of being able to be controlled through an expression pedal, still fully analog, no digital whatsoever. Then after that, we have the Deluxe Memory Man. This one I've modified to true bypass so that it can sit in series with everything and not be noisy. And again, I lucked out that this one is a fairly quiet one. I converted it to 24 volts from the original AC cord, but I do believe it's an early 90s one. But this thing sounds incredible. I've had it on almost the entire time we've been playing here, but I'll show you a little demonstration of that. So here it is off, and I'll turn off the M9 for this purpose as well. Here it is on. Let's get a little more mix, a little more delay. Sounds absolutely incredible. Nothing does what it does. It just has an analogness that is unmatched by any other pedal that I've ever used. I love them. They can be a pain to work with sometimes, but again, I've got it about as stable as it can possibly be. And again, with the true bypass switch on it, which I have wired in to be fully bypassed with an alpha switch, I'm confident that will last. And if something happens, I can always bypass it and then just exclusively use the M9 for all of my other delay needs. But absolutely love this. I mean, again, I have on the compression right now, but it really just does everything. It's just the most gorgeous. This can't be beaten. You got to have one. Last thing on the board, it's going stereo out back into the Vertex buffer interface so that we can get stereo back to the AC30 and the Bandmaster. It is the M9. And this is something that's been a staple on Nashville boards for really decades. And a lot of them still haven't made the move to the newest HX effects, which is sort of the next in line after the M9. And I've asked a lot of these guys why they don't use the newest HX effects. And the reason why is that everything here has a knob. So when you go to any effect, whether it's reverb or I'm turning on delay, I have a knob that can control every parameter of that particular effect. And when you're dealing with a producer in a studio and you need to dial in tones fast and you need to make adjustments quickly, this is a necessity to be able to dial in sounds quickly and to be able to have everything available to you on the face of the effect. So I can very quickly go from having 3 different delays and 3 different reverbs to changing it to 1 delay, 1 reverb, 1 phaser, 1 chorus, whatever combination thereof I might need. And it's all available in one box. And I don't think guys are choosing this necessarily because it's the best sounding thing out there, but the workflow on this is very easy. But it also does sound great. The whole time we've been playing here, I've had on the 63 reverb setting just to add a little reverb to these 2 amps, which don't have any reverb. And everything is running in front of the amps, I should say. And I've been kind of going on and off with this analog with mod, which I think is one of the best delay settings on there. And I think that 63 reverb is probably one of the best reverb settings on there. But it sounds great. So here's totally dry. Nothing. Here's a little delay. Here's adding a little reverb. It delivers on what you'd want. I mean, maybe it doesn't have the analog nature of the Memory Man, but if I'm in analog with mod and I want a nice, beautiful textural sound, there's nothing preventing me from getting that. It does everything I could want. If I turn that off and I go to the Memory Man, you can kind of hear the difference. The Memory Man kind of clips a little bit, which gives it a warmth. And again, at the end of this, it goes stereo out. It's the only stereo effect on the board. It goes back out through the Vertex buffer interface, has 2 output buffers in addition to the input buffer when you plug in. Has an isolation transformer, so these 2 amps are galvanically isolated from one another with the high quality buffer, with the transformer on one side, and then you have that polarity switch so that you get the amps in phase. And it's a beautiful thing. And the other thing that we should talk about here, in addition to the Vertex pedal board, which we mentioned briefly, is that we have 2 power supplies underneath that are from our friends over at True Tone. I have a CS12 and a CS7 here, and they are both wired into a Vertex power module, which is basically a glorified power strip where it can take 2 AC cables and then transmit that into a single IEC connector, which then plugs into the wall. So I have 2 different power supplies here that are wired into that, and then I just have 1 cable into the wall, so I don't have to have multiple IEC cables going back and forth for the AC. And I've pretty much maxed out these 2 power supplies to be able to power everything. I think everything has its own isolated supply. Of course, the memory man sharing 2 different outputs. And then, yeah, it is a great board. I got all Mogami 2314 cable throughout, and I'm using the provided power cables that came with the True Tone stuff, and I'm just rewiring those, cutting them down to size, and then using Kobicon 2.1 millimeter power cables in order to re-terminate them and make them slightly smaller. Dual lock for all of the fasteners for everything, and square plugs for all the connectors, mostly SP400s here. And I think I have a couple of SPS4s for the straights that are going in to the interface box. But man, it is a clean rig. Again, all on a Tour Elite pedal board. I couldn't be happier. Now, if you're seeing this and you're saying to yourself, man, I'd really like a rig like that, you may have heard that I do not build pedal boards anymore. But the good news is that our sister company, the Rig Doctor, has just opened the doors for rig builds. So if you're interested in something like this and you want something built with my methodology and the way that I do things and that is overseen by me, the Rig Doctor is a great place for you to go. You can get a quote from them there, and you will be able to have somebody that's one of our approved team members who I've trained to build you the pedal board of your dreams. Now, I built this one myself, but I can assure you that all of the gear, all of the products, all the buffering, all the cables, it is all stuff that I have approved and signed off on, built by people that I have trained personally on how to build and emulate rigs exactly like this. So I highly recommend, if you like this pedal board or any of the other ones that you've seen us build for other pros like Corey Wong or Tosin Abasi, Eric Krasno, Eric Walls, Tom Bukovac, Dan Huff, fill in the blank, whoever it is, and you want that quality of workmanship, if you want that style of pedal board as you see here, go over to therigdr.com, have them give you a quote. You'll be getting that very same quality of workmanship, that same quality of sound in your studio, on stage, or wherever you may be using this particular type of gear. So please do check them out. In addition to that, they offer custom cables if you want to DIY this project and do something similar, in addition to selling our Vertex pedal boards and our Vertex buffer interfaces, as well as all of the standard retailers of Vertex products will have many of these things available as far as the nuts and bolts of the pedal board, like the pedal board surface, buffer interfaces, power module, etc. So until next time, I am Mason Marangella from Vertex Effects. This was my exploration of a brand new Nashville session musician inspired pedal board. Although I'm not the player that could probably do this thing justice, it was really fun. I've taken over a year to do it and carefully curated every part. And I really feel like I've got there as far as the sound, the quality of the effects. And I don't foresee that I'll be changing much on this. I really like everything that's here. I love the versatility. And when I'm tracking my own music, I could see where these selections will be really useful for me in order to really get sounds fast and get really great sounds in this beautiful stereo rig. Until next time, I'm Mason Marangella, also known when I'm building rigs as the Rig Doctor. I'll see you later.